Is he not approved in the height a villain that hath slandered, scorned, dishonored my kinswoman? O God, that I were a man, I would eat his heart in the marketplace. But manhood has melted into curtsies, valor into compliment. I cannot be a man with wishing, therefore I will die a woman with grieving. This quote is from Much Ado About Nothing, said by Beatrice, one of the best, most famous heroines of Shakespearean canon. And I think it's easy to identify with Beatrice in this particular moment, that one moment where you realize that just because you are who you are, you can't do that thing you really want to do. It's easy to come to that moment, that closed door that says boys only, and wish to be someone else, to have that Beatrice thought, oh God, that I were a man. I had that thought quite recently, but I'll get to that story a little later. First, I want to tell you about why I love Shakespeare as much as I do. When I have complicated feelings and thoughts, I often turn to Shakespeare to help me put into words how I feel. I believe it's like my Bible in that way. Because I found throughout my 25-year love affair with Will that he understands the human experience in a way that is truly universal. I've yet to come across a moment in my life that I can't apply to some moment, some character, somewhere in the Shakespeare canon. Beatrice's quote, I think, is a good example of that. Here's an old white dude accurately describing the infuriating injustice that is sometimes being female. Shakespeare was able to look beyond himself so profoundly to see the realities of other humans and their experiences, but not just their experiences, but the specific realities and the specific ramifications and challenges of what it meant to be an underdog. Women, people of color, people who are differently abled, LGBTQ, elders, prisoners, the poor. Shakespeare wrote about them all and so many more. I believe there truly, truly is something for everyone to identify within Shakespeare. But not everyone feels that way, and I totally can't blame them. Looking at the faces, the original actors of Shakespeare's company, you'll probably be able to identify some of those barriers. The guys who worked there all looked a lot alike. Shakespeare's plays have a 400-year-long history of being a boys' club for men who looked like this. It's no surprise, then, that Shakespeare's plays still have a deserved reputation for being exclusive. The classical theater is still a world that belongs first to them and to everyone else second or third, or maybe not at all. I find it tragic that something as diverse, as empathetic, as aware as Shakespeare can be is in many ways still a symbol of exclusivity. I had the incredible privilege of this summer of playing Rosalind in As You Like It, which is a dream role for most Shakespearean actresses. She's the largest female role in the Shakespeare canon at 685 lines. And words are power in Shakespeare. They are your agency. But when you reintroduce the men into the canon, Rosalind jumps down to number 15, and Hamlet's at the top with more than twice her words at 1,506. The most powerful woman in Shakespeare's canon cannot hold a candle to Iago, Leontes, Macbeth, King Henry. But hell, Rosalind's still awesome. She's witty and powerful and charming, and any woman working in Shakespeare should be thrilled to play her. But should she be where it ends? For most of my career, I thought I was okay with that. Not a lot of women even get their hands on these incredible roles, the Juliets, the Violas, the Imogens, Cordelias. I was damn lucky to be them, and so I was content. Until D'Artagnan. This fall, I enjoyed another incredible privilege, the chance to play a real swashbuckling hero in our production of The Three Musketeers. And if I thought it felt powerful to be Rosalind, D'Artagnan blew her out of the water. I do not diminish the value of Rosalind or characters like her, but until I felt what it was like to be someone who was undeniably the hero and the strength of their own story, I never knew what I was missing. It was like being invited to a club I never even knew I wanted to be invited to. I fell in love, real love, with the stage combat as I learned the choreography for the show. I mean, are you kidding me? There is nothing that in the world that makes you feel like more of a badass than somebody handing you a sword and saying, you're going to use this and you're going to win. Why hadn't I done this before? And it's probably because of that closed door I mentioned earlier, the boys-only one. Even I must have realized the relative futility of learning a specialized skill I'd only rarely get to use. But I wasn't going to let that barrier dictate whether or not I pursued the skill. I'd fallen in love with stage combat the same way I fell in love with Shakespeare and with acting, and I wasn't gonna just not do it. So I made a goal for myself. I wanted to become an advanced actor combatant recognized by the Society of American Fight Directors. So I signed up for my very first fight workshop where I could get my hours along with my husband and one of my best male friends, and we headed out. And you'll be not so shocked to hear that I had a very different experience than they did. because that boys only sign wasn't exactly posted on the door anymore, but we could all see the outline from where it used to be. My male compatriots had no difficulty making friends or choosing partners in class, but I sure did. And I checked myself really hard to make sure that I wasn't projecting my own insecurities onto others. I was definitely actually nervous to be there, and maybe this was in my head. But after 2 days, I felt sure that there was a reason why Joe and Ryan felt right at home and I simply didn't. No one did or said anything outlandishly cruel to me, but they did always choose to talk to Joe instead. No one directly refused to work with me in class, but they would make eye contact and then quickly redirect and choose a male partner. And most upsetting of all, it was the female fighters, oftener than not, who were the worst offenders of this. I've lived at my own theater for so long, where I have little to prove, that I'd forgotten how bad that feels when that happens. That instant distrust that women sometimes feel for one another, especially when they're in a man's environment. And we've all felt that, and if we're being honest with ourselves, we've probably participated in it as well. I could be angry with those women. How dare you shut me out when you know how that feels? I thought that Beatrice thought, oh God, that I were a man, I would feel so much more home here. But how could I be angry? The patriarchal world had trained these fierce women up to feel the same sense of competition and distrust. That sense of I barely made it into this boys' club and I don't have the energy to compete with you too. But there were also many women fighters who were exceptionally gracious, ones who had opened the door and said, come in. And in truth, that is what Beatrice's speech is about, calling out the men who had dishonored her kinswoman and coming to her sister's defense. I learned a lot at that conference about targeting and footwork and parries and glissades, but the most important thing I took home was this. As a woman who wants to walk through those boys-only doors, I must remember to not only fight my way to the door, but to hold it open for the woman behind me and say, come in. And then she must do the same for the woman behind her. Otherwise, it's still a boys' club. All for one and one for all, united to stand, divided we fall.